7 o'clock, and I'll call tonight's meeting to order. We have an agenda in front of us. Does anybody have any additions to the agenda? This side?
Your worship, if I could add 8.3.
Okay.
It's the wastewater treatment facility grant.
Okay. Next 8.3. Everybody's got that. Any other additions? Okay, just need a motion to accept the agenda as amended. Councillor Auld?
I'll make that motion.
All in favor? Carried. We'll move on to 3.1. We have a delegation. We have Mr. Ryan Stombaugh from the Rocky Rams Hockey Club. Welcome. I will turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you. Good evening. I'm going to keep it really short tonight. From the Rocky Rams, our request is for an extension of the Rams' current ice user rates and agreement that we would like to see take place or stay in effect until the end of the 2022-2023 season.
Okay. So starting this year, all of next year.
Yeah, so we sat with you guys before the season started with us and negotiated out rates for us moving forward. That contract is up at the end of this year. With COVID and everything that's going on in the communities, we want to sooner than later set our rates for the next coming 2 seasons. With no fans this year, we played part of a season. Sponsorship and community support was great, but we can't just rely on that moving forward. It's the fans getting people into the building with that limited number this year. We're not sure where we're going to be for the coming season, and our expenses moving forward, we just like to see if we can lock them in for another 2 years at the current rates.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? No? Councilor Fraser, did you have your hand up? No?
Nope, I was just opening up.
Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions either, so if you just want to hang out for a bit, we just have some minutes to accept and then we'll discuss this.
Perfect.
Okay? Okay, so moving on to number adoption of previous minutes, number 4.1. Everybody's had a chance to read the minutes. Councilor Fraser?
If there are no corrections, I will move to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay, so we'll move on to number 5.1, delegation business, discussion and decision around request from the Rocky Rams Hockey Club. Councilor Phillips?
I mean, the Rams have definitely created some more excitement down at the arena, and it's great to see the out-of-town teams come in and the economic business it brings to town. Unfortunately, COVID shortened the season for them this year, so I don't see any reason why we shouldn't grant this request.
Yeah, Your worship, maybe just for clarification, because I guess we should have had it in the package. So what council did was approve the youth rate for them to get their start up and so forth. So it'd be approving the youth rate, which I think, Wes can correct me if I'm wrong, but $100 per hour.
Yes.
So that would be for the next 2 seasons versus 140. Yeah.
45, I think.
So,
Okay, thanks. Councilor Auld?
I just want to echo Ben's statement. I think we as a community need to stand behind whatever sport teams we have, whatever we can do. If this is all they're asking for, I think it's a pretty easy decision for me.
Okay, Councilor Brown?
Yeah, I'm on the same wavelength as both my councillor colleagues.
Yeah, and I also echo everything. I think it's a fair and reasonable request. So seeing Councilor Fraser?
Well, I was just going to say, the goal with giving them the youth rate was to help them get started before moving to the full rate, and I think this year has not been.
They haven't got started.
It's a mulligan.
Yeah, so for sure. Okay. So just need a motion then, Councillor Phillips.
I'll make a motion that the town of Rocky extend the ice user rental contract agreement for the Rocky Junior Bees through to the end of 2022-2023 season.
At the youth
At
rate.
the youth rate.
Youth rate.
Thank you.
You have that, Renee?
Yes, I do.
Good.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding around that? Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Stonebach, for coming in. So we'll move on to number 6. RFD, the Waste Management Bylaw, second and third reading.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So on February 2nd, we did the first reading of the bylaw 2020/25 Waste Management Bylaw. What I can do, if you would like, is I can kind of go through the bylaw again with you, see if you have any questions, if everyone's good with that.
But it hasn't changed since last.
There's been no changes to the bylaw.
What is council?
Your Worship, I think I'd just like to bring council up to speed on one part of it, and actually we reviewed the bylaw for this, and it works for it. So, under Rocky Waste Authority, the mobile home parks were under a commercial account. 2 of those mobile home parks actually use totes that we weren't aware of, so they actually got curbside pickup within the park. And because there was a commercial account on our utility account, they'd only be charged $16.95 for the recycling. So right now, they're still on the commercial account being charged $16.95 per month. So that means all the mobile homes within that park would be able to use the Eco Center, where the whole park would only pay $16.95 a month. So what we're going to do, we're going to work with mobile home parks is actually have curbside pickup, transition all parks to curbside pickup. So then each individual residents would be charged that the flat fee for curbside garbage pickup, use of the Eco Center, and then in spring, the organics. So just clarification there. But we'll work with the parks for that transition.
Okay, so then ultimately in the end, then they would just, everybody be paying the same rate as
Yes.
all other homeowners
Yes.
in town. Okay,
So Your Worship, in the bylaw, it actually references in here that the collection service is provided to residential premises, and then it defines residential premises in the bylaw. There's a separate definition for apartment buildings and residential complexes, and under residential complexes, that's where the manufactured home parks is included. And it does leave in the bylaw under section 3.3 that at the discretion of the resident or of the administrator, the collection service would be provided. So a lot of it is dependent on access, but as soon as the collection service is provided, it changes the fee that's charged to the $27.52.
Collection service.
So it would still comply with the bylaw. And then it just says, those that do not receive the collection service pay the non-residential rate under the town's fees, rates, and charges bylaw.
everybody clear on that? Any other questions? No? And then nothing else has changed, so.
No, and we've addressed Councillor Brown's inquiry under section 5.11.
So we have a recommended alternative in front of us. Councillor Phillips.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion that council gives second reading to Waste Management Bylaw 2020/25, a bylaw to regulate solid waste, organics, and recycling in the town of Rocky Mountain House. That's presented.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Councillor Fraser.
If there's no further discussion, I will move that council give third and final reading to Waste Management Bylaw 2020/25.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Awesome.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council.
Okay, so we're going to move on to new business, number 7.1. The public release of negotiation summary notes.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. So at their last council meeting, Councilor Narang put forward a administrative inquiry about the process of releasing the summary notes from negotiations publicly. That was a result from a Clearwater councillor's Facebook post suggesting to a resident that they asked the town for that. So administration reviewed the administrative inquiry, and of course, under the negotiations are covered under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. But in that act, they can be released upon the agreement of all the parties involved in the negotiations. In reviewing our protocols, we have two protocols for negotiations, one involving Clearwater County and the Village of Caroline, and the other one with just Clearwater County. Both protocols have provisions in there that the details can be released upon approval of all parties. So that's to answer Councillor Narang's administrative inquiry. Yes, they can be released as long as each party is in agreement to that. So if council wishes for that to be, to start that process of releasing the summary notes for public, council would have to pass a resolution authorizing that and send a letter to Clearwater and the village to do the same.
Discussion, Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting on the negotiating committee. I think that this would actually be a good thing that this information was accessible to the public, because there's been so much confusion and people just thinking that the changes that they're seeing now have kind of come out of nowhere. And I think that the summary notes that we have access to are so clear and outline the process so well that I think that it would be, from my mind, definitely a benefit to residents to be able to see all the hard work and conversation that's gone into where we are now.
Councillor Brown?
We've gone to great lengths right from the election to be as clear, as transparent, and as open as possible. And I think this is just a demonstration that we're committed to that. So I would definitely support it.
Councillor Narang?
And also, I think the other important thing about releasing the summary notes is that those notes are approved by everybody around that table. So there's nothing to say, no, that didn't happen, or this didn't happen, or that's not what was said. It's very clear we all agreed this is what the procedures have been going on. So I think that that's another important reason why it might be a valuable resource for residents to have access to.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Phillips?
Just echoing Councillor Narang's comments, there's a lot of misinformation going on, and I think these summary notes would clarify a lot of the misinformation, and I fully support that we open this up to the public.
Any other discussion?
Same.
Councillor Narang?
I can make the motion if there's no further discussion. Be it resolved that council approves the public release of the tri-party negotiation summary notes starting with the first negotiation meeting on October 11th, 2019 to the most recent approved summary notes subject to the consent of Clearwater County and the Village of Caroline. Do I keep going? All three of them?
It could be three separate, or you could do it all together. So it's up to council's discretion.
You're doing well.
I just want to make sure that I'm not hamstringing anybody, but I think, yeah, I'll just keep going if that's fine. Okay. Further be it resolved that council approves the public release of the county and town negotiation summary notes starting with the first negotiation meeting on March 11th, 2020 to the most recent approved summary notes subject to the consent of Clearwater County. Further be it resolved that council advises Clearwater County and the Village of Caroline of the town's consent to publicly release the negotiation, I'm assuming that's what
Yes,
I'm saying, the negotiation summary notes and request their consideration of the same.
Okay, everybody clear on that motion? Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Narang. I'm reading all on that. So we'll move on to 7.2. Updated recreation facilities operation report. Good afternoon, Wes. So we were all given your notes from today. is which we're going to be discussing here, right?
Yes.
Okay,
So my original report was drafted last week under one set of information, and then, of course, on the weekend, the province made some amendments to step one. So I guess just a little bit of background. So as you're all aware, on December the 13th, 2020, the province announced additional COVID-19 restrictions which have had an impact on our community. In particular, these restrictions resulted in the closure of our recreational facilities. So hopefully through this report, we can provide a little update as to where we've come since then. In the comment section of my original report, again, our facilities remain closed since that time, and that's resulted in some temporary layoffs to both casual and full-time staff, as well as the temporary reallocation of 3 of our staff to other departments. On January 28th, the province announced the path forward, 4-step outline, and that sees a gradual restriction changes based on hospitalization benchmarks. The first steps were to take effect yesterday, February the 8th, and subsequent steps would happen at least 3 weeks apart. So in step one, the guidelines did permit school use of facilities for physical education classes, but this time we've not received any correspondence or requests from any of the schools to use our recreation facilities. Step one also allowed for one-on-one fitness activities. This could possibly be one-on-one private instruction at the pool, the arena, or a fitness center. The limited facility use, those activities did not make it financially feasible to open the facilities. And that's where my supplemental information, speaks a little bit more to what's transpired on the weekend. I'm not sure if you've got that supplementary up there. So on Saturday, the province amended step one, and so they've made some allowances for children and youth to be allowed to participate in lessons, practices, and conditioning activities for indoor and outdoor team-based sports. They've outlined some of the criteria with age, and the key is the maximum number of 10 people, which includes a coach or instructor. And then, of course, the participants all must physical distance. So I'll begin first with the arena operations. So following the announcement, we were able to call representatives from our youth ICE user groups, and we met yesterday to discuss the implications of the announcements and what that would have for a possible remainder of the ICE use season. We presented the users with a proposed schedule of ice times that could be used to facilitate the ability for the youth in planning the rest of their season. It would require a commitment from the groups to book enough time to make it feasible to keep the arena open. The proposed ice use schedule that we put forth would be maintained until at least April the 1st. That's a total of 7 weeks. And so we proposed a Monday to Friday would see a minimum of 8 one-hour sessions on using both ice surfaces. And the weekends, we would see a reduced schedule to accommodate 1 8-hour shift for our staff. That would allow for 12 one-hour sessions each day on Saturday and Sunday. So the initial plan would be to open only on Saturday, unless there was enough demand to open up Sunday as well. So we're looking at all of our options. So the plan would make available 40 hours of ice from Monday to Friday, an additional 12 to 24, depending on 1 or 2 days on the weekends. I did highlight in my report the information that we got from our ice users. So the Speed Skating Club they're interested in returning to their regular hours, which is about 6 hours during the week, and they're looking at some additional training time on the weekends. They've got, I guess, one athlete who's doing some high-level training. The Junior B Rams, at this point have scheduled 4 hours during the week and are looking at additional time on the weekends. One of the challenges that Junior Bs have is the age restriction of 18 and under, so that doesn't allow for their entire team to practice. They're seeking an exemption with the province to allow for their entire team to be allowed to participate in activities, and they'll divide them into the groups of 9 skaters and a coach. So they're basically doubling up on what their usual ice times would be to accommodate that. Rocky Minor Hockey is willing to commit to as much ice time as they can get. They're dividing all their teams into the 2 groups to accommodate the size of 10. And then just received confirmation at noon today that there will be a minimum of 22 hours a week, which would give each of their participants 1 ice session. They're shooting to get each of the kids on the ice twice a week. So we're reaching, it's a minimum of 22 hours, but it could be in that 30 to 35, potentially over 40 hours a week, which would fill up all the potential slots that we would have. The Trailblazers Rec Hockey, so at this point, they've indicated that they're not going to consider returning to play, but if the government did make changes on March 1st that would allow for larger team sizes, they would consider coming back at that time. I'm not sure if it's a financial situation where they couldn't afford to pay for the additional ice times and split up their groups. And the Rocky Figure Skating Club, they made the decision last week that they were basically canceling the remainder of their season, and they've begun the process of giving out refunds to all of their participants. And as I mentioned, school use at this time would be permitted, but we haven't received any feedback from the schools. So based on the feedback from the youth user groups, administration would recommend reopening the arena for youth group activities to at least April the 1st. And if there were further changes to provincial restrictions, it would be possible to revisit the availability for additional 3 to 4 weeks to perhaps the end of April. And what that looks like, it's too early to know at this point, but we would sort of reevaluate mid-March and see what the group's feeling would be. Perhaps we could keep 1 ice surface in for additional time, but at this point, our plan is to go to April 1st, which is 7 weeks. The second part of my supplemental dealt with the aquatic center. Basically, the announcement of the province really didn't affect the pool because the things we were permitted to do was still the individual lessons and possible swim club training. So you'd have limited numbers of people in the water or in the pool at any one time. Still not financially feasible at this time. And perhaps when we get to step 2 and they loosen it up and allow for public swimming or lane swimming, that sort of going back to what we did before the December 13th closure. So that's the direction we're going. So my recommendations that I had in my original report have changed based on the new information. So you have those recommended alternatives in front of you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
When would you normally take the ice out?
End of March.
End of March.
So we're basically extending it for the last weekend of March. April 1st is the Thursday before the Easter weekend.
I was part of the ice user group meeting back in January. I know there was a lot of interest from the groups to go into April because they missed out on December and January already. Hopefully that will be the case and we can keep kids going longer. Hopefully the restrictions will lift and we can get some other ice user groups in there as well, but I like that we can at least get some groups in there using it.
Yeah, I think the challenge is the number of 10. So that does put a financial burden on some other groups that now they're basically booking double the ice. Hockey Alberta did announce as well in a supplemental document that came out today that they are allowing shared ice, so you can divide the surface in half and do 2 groups of 10 on the ice at the same time, like which would normally happen for the younger age groups anyways.
Any other questions? Councilor Brown?
Wes, just regarding your second recommendation, you're looking at the possibility of opening the ice early. And I'm assuming you don't have any indication and won't have an indication as to how early until we get a little farther into the year?
We've had discussions with the Junior League Rams that are interested in putting up a hockey camp. They've committed to substantial amount of ice for the last 2 weeks of August. So starting the process in like the first week of August to get the ice in, or at least get one ice surface in for the middle of August. So again,
So I'm assuming the criteria for numbers and hours that are booked will be the same as what we're putting in place to extend the season?
yes, we're looking at, we probably need about 40 hours per ice surface to make it financially feasible. This right now doesn't quite reach that 80 hours, but it does allow the people to come in. So from what the Junior Bees have indicated for the August early start, they would certainly have the 40 hours a week commitment.
Sounds good, thank you.
Councilor Phillips?
Just on top of that, I know, Caroline, Sylvan Lake, a lot of those arenas do have early summer ice time, and they book up quite a bit, not necessarily from their areas, but from Calgary and Edmonton, bringing people into those areas. I know it's been talked about a lot, and it's never been done here, but I think it's probably time that we give it a very serious consideration of bringing ice in earlier, because we have the interest for it.
I think that was the direction we were going, wasn't it, before COVID?
Yeah.
Advertising that?
Yeah, I was looking at that anyway, so I've wrapped that up into this report as well, as we were certainly very interested in reaching out. I know that both Ryan with the Junior Bees and Mike, our arena manager, have touched base with people that they're in contact with, so I think the word is out there that we're looking, and sometimes you have to get them a year in advance, depending on where they're at with other camps that they may run.
Just a little historical context. The effort or the intent has always been to open the season early, but we've never ever had the commitment from user groups to give us the hours we need to make it viable.
In 2019, it was open early, but that was because of the Masters games, and it just kept the ice in. But the challenge is sometimes you put the ice in August, and then some of the groups aren't really ready to go till end of September or October, so the ice, there's a lull. So.
Okay, Councilor Brown?
Okay, unless there's any further discussion, I'll make the motion that council accept the recreation facility operations report and instruct administration to keep the ice in until at least April 1, 2021, and bring back a report prior to that date with option to keep ice in until the end of April 2021.
Any other comments, questions? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thanks.
Are we going to do the second motion also? About the early?
Is this all not just dependent on what happens?
I guess just looking for council's blessing to pursue that as an option.
Yeah. Councilor Phillips?
I'd like to make a motion that council instruct administration to work with user groups to possibly put in the ice early for the 2021-22 season to facilitate possible sport camps if provincial restrictions allow.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? Carried. Thanks for that report and all the meetings. We'll move on to number 8.1, the TELUS Universal Broadband Fund support letter request, proposed support letter.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So we received an email from TELUS asking the town to support a grant application to the Universal Broadband Fund. So it's for council's consideration. So it would be upgrades in our town and area.
Makes sense to support this if it's going to improve the service in the area, for sure. Councilor Fraser?
Well, I think this kind of wraps a lot of things up as far as there's a private business that is looking at improving the service. There is a federal grant that has federal dollars attached to the utility. It just makes the most sense for us to support this path.
Okay. Councilor Lulu, what would you like to do? The support? Okay, I'll make a motion actually to send a letter of support for the TELUS Universal Broadband Fund. Is that good enough, Renee?
Yes, it is. Yeah, thanks, Your Worship.
All in favor of that motion? And it's carried. Okay, number 8.2. The letter from the Municipal District of Bonnyville, need for stronger Western Canadian municipal advocacy. Everybody read this letter. I read the letter, but I don't know. What they're trying to do here is almost trying to start a Western Canadian municipalities, and to me it just seems a little bit divisive, and especially since we're just going into an election year.
Yeah.
I don't know. What's everybody else think on this? Councillor Auld?
I'm just curious whether this would dilute what the FCM is doing, whether it's going to divide kind of their area of focus, or are we going to get nothing with the FCM if we support this?
Right. If anything, I would say that, because there is a division now of FCM that's specifically supposed to be focusing on the western side of the country. I'm not even sure. Do you know what the name of that is?
No, Your Worship, sorry.
But
It's like a task force.
It is. It's like the Western Canadian.
It's in the letter.
Oh, is it?
Solutions Town, there it is.
Yeah, okay. I mean, honestly, if there's anything, I would suggest FCM to ramp up those efforts. Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I would suggest that my question back and to us as well is how active have we been in requesting that advocacy and in being involved and doing our part when that's a resource that's available to municipalities. How active have we been in utilizing that? So that would be my question back to them, because I also think I agree it is divisive, and I'm kind of over that right now with everything.
Yeah, we need to pull together.
Yeah, and I think that maybe the question should be, what can we as Western Canadian municipalities do to work closer with FCM and have our issues be brought to FCM and just be more participatory?
Well, we do have also FCM reps from Western Canada. So, really perhaps we should be reaching out to them and saying,
Hey.
what are you doing to bring out, all of our, the concerns of the West, and how are you promoting that to us? So,
Yeah.
so could we possibly do a little bit more research on that, or?
Yeah, Your Worship, so then you just accept this letter for information.
Yeah.
And then ask administration to
Okay.
reach out to us.
Like, could we invite our representative to a council meeting to have a meeting with our FCM rep and say, hey, what's going on? What are we doing?
Yeah.
What do you need from us?
That's a good idea, and especially now since it's virtual.
Yeah.
Right? That's so much easier, so let's do that. Or maybe even a couple of them, because there's more than one.
Yep.
Okay, so just a motion, please, to accept this letter for information. Councillor Auld?
I'll make that motion.
All in favor of that motion? And then, motion to purchase.
So it'd be the Alberta representation on the board of directors of FCM to attend a virtual delegation to council.
Yes.
Just to give us an update on FCM activity.
That's right. And to possibly look at some of the concerns in this letter and say, hey, what are you going to do? Is it possible to
Address this.
have better messaging out there?
And I would include that Western Task Force in that
Yes,
request.
yes, for sure. Admin has the, Renee, are you good with that motion?
Yeah, would you like me to read it back?
Sure.
Just be it resolved that council accept the municipal district of Bonnyville's letter as information and for administration to reach out to Alberta representation on the board of FCM to request a meeting.
Should be 2 resolutions.
Two, yeah,
Two representatives?
no, two resolutions. We just
Oh, you want two
accepted.
separate, okay.
Yeah, we did already accept, Councillor Ald had that one to
Yeah,
accept
the
his
first one.
information.
Yeah.
And so, and then Councillor Phillips is making the second motion.
Okay.
Can we add in there that not just the FCM, but the Canadian Task or the Western Canada Task Force to be included in that?
Yes, that's a good idea. Well, it's your
Yeah,
motion.
I'll amend my motion.
Okay. To include the Western Canadian Task Force. Okay. ICMs. Sorry, that's kind of a lot we're throwing at you. They're all sort of little bits and pieces.
This should be good. I'll read it back to you. if you
Okay,
like.
sure.
So the first resolution is just be it resolved that council accept the municipal district of Bonnyville letter as information. And that was made by Councillor Ald. And the second resolution made by Councillor Phillips was be it resolved that administration reach out to the Alberta representation on the board of FCM and request a meeting and to include the Western Canadian Task Force.
Are we good with that?
Good. Okay.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? Carried. Good, thanks, Renee.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So we'll move on to number 8.3, the grant agreement for the wastewater facility.
Thank you, Worship. So as council's aware, we received letters in the past from both the federal and provincial governments that we've been awarded the grant for the wastewater treatment plant. So we now have received the actual grant agreement, which is a total funding of $19,962,626. So administration is just looking for council's approval to sign that grant agreement, and we'll get on with the project as council's already budgeted for it in 2021.
This is a big deal. This is exciting news for our community to get both of these grants.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So, yeah, well done to admin for
Yeah,
applying for all of
thank
these,
you.
and, yeah, this is great. So, Councillor Brown?
Okay, unless there's further discussion, I'd like to put forth a motion that council authorizes the Chief Administrative Officer to sign the Rural Northern Communities Infrastructure Project Grant Agreement for the wastewater treatment facility with the total funding $19,962,626 from the Government of Canada and the Government of Alberta.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor of that motion? Yes, and carried. That's great. It just somehow feels better now that we have the agreement here. Okay, so we have the correspondence for information. Just need a motion to accept 9.1 to 9.10 as info. Councillor Narang? Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. And we have an action list. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on the action list? Is there more going on here? Oh, there's still some there. Slacking administrative, or a slacking action list. Okay, just need a motion to accept the action list as presented. Councillor Fraser,
I so move.
all in favor of that motion? Carried. Does anybody have any administrative inquiries? Councillor Narang?
Yep. Well, I think it's an administrative inquiry.
Oh dear.
I'd probably turn into a notice of motion if my history's true. true. I was watching the county council, Clearwater County Council meeting today, and they were talking a lot about the recycling depot in town. And I was just wondering if it would make sense for us just to send them an invitation to participate and what that might look like with their participation in the Eco Center. Because just the conversation sounded like they were interested in having the service in town, so I thought maybe that would be reasonable.
Just a question for Councilor, would that be a public invitation?
Yeah. Like, I don't know if we would outline like a potential cost or how that would look, or...
This really isn't an administrative
What is it?
requirement. It's more of a notice of motion.
Okay, see, I knew that's where I was going. All right, next. I think Len had his hand up.
But, Your Worship, I mean, the topic can be added to the agenda if council wants to discuss it and make a motion.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So I'll go next after the administrative inquiries are done.
Councilor Phillips?
I had a couple. The Eco Center, in regards to multifamily.
Is there an echo?
In regards to multifamily units, I had a concerned citizen ask me about it, saying that they needed to get passes for each individual tenant.
That's correct.
So,
Yeah.
I guess the inquiry was if they could just get, if they have 20 units in their building, if they could get 20 passes and then be responsible for those 20 passes, as opposed to having each individual, because the tenants switch over all the time, so the pass would stay with the unit as opposed to the...
Oh, like the utility bill?
No, Your Worship, I think the way the waste bylaw is, it is the resident that obtains the card.
Okay.
So,
Because the resident now is responsible for the utilities. Or sorry,
the other way around.
the renter
no, the owner would be.
The owner is...
of the utilities? I thought we're switching that.
No, yeah, from tenant to owner.
Goes to the property
Oh, right.
taxes.
Jeez. Yes.
So this was because an owner went in to get passes for everybody and couldn't, basically. It didn't happen.
I'll refer to Ms. Quinlan.
Could we look into that a little bit? It's kind of a new way of looking at it, that they belong with the
Utility holder,
the site rather than the resident. It's certainly not something that's out of the question, but just, we hadn't sort of looked at it that way.
It was just a concern that they went in there to get the passes, couldn't, and were frustrated.
But I think this is such a new process, and I appreciate that there is some frustration, but I also appreciate that there's a lot of people. We have to work through these little glitches, right? And there are bound to be some.
And that's why I was bringing up as an inquiry to see if there's some way we
Yeah,
can make it
I
easier.
guess just on the side of the way where we were handling it, like if there's 20 residential properties there, people only need a pass if they actually want to go to the Eco Center. I know we want them all to, but not everybody is going to be recycling. So, I mean, they could leave it to each individual resident to, if they require one, to go get a card. So it's up to the individual tenant to get their own card.
Because what do they need to show to get the card
utility
again?
bill.
A utility bill.
Or a driver's license with a civic address on it,
We just
or...
need to see that they have a civic address in town.
Okay.
So they can go get their own card.
That makes sense.
Well, and that works for someone that's actually living in town, but someone that's renting a unit and lives in Okotoks and is renting a unit in Rocky, they're not going to have a Rocky civic address.
Yeah, but they would have a lease agreement or a, cable invoice
Just a
or...
piece of mail.
So,
But wouldn't that make sense that say an apartment owner could have 20 cards for unit 201? Not 20 cards for 201, but one card per unit and then,
Issues a key and issues a card.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
the
what I was
suggestion from the owner was if I have that card to unit 201 and unit 201 loses that card, they have to pay a
Yeah,
fee because
sure.
they lost that card.
And then that would be between the the landlord and the tenant.
Yes.
Your worship, I think
Let's
we need
look
to
into it.
review it and bring it
Yeah,
back to.
sounds good. Okay. Wes?
I'm just questioning our Max Enterprise system, whether it allows for that. I mean, I guess you could set up as a household with X number of people in there.
multiple
We
cards,
do
yeah.
that for people anyways. Everyone could have a card.
So just some further research, so that's good. Okay, Councilor Fraser?
I was just saying it might actually be good because people in the rental units often aren't in the community to be, like, they're coming from outside. So to say, here's your key, here's your card to the Eco Center, here's the pamphlet for what goes on at the Eco Center, it might just bring some awareness to people who didn't know it was a service if they're coming into town. To say, here's the card to the Eco Center, it might actually have people go that didn't know it was there before.
Good, so we'll have that information come back. Any other?
Second.
Okay.
Second. Just in the industrial area, we had some concern back when about internet service in some of the industrial part of town. And I know Shaw was looking at helping to rectify that. And I'm not sure whatever happened with that. And the inquiry is something like Starlink. Would that be an alternative to some of these people, some of these businesses?
But Starlink, you can get on the list, right? Like, there's quite a few people that are on Starlink already in town. So that would be up to the individual business to get onto Starlink.
Yeah. To find their own service provider, yeah, so.
I think Shaw is offering the fastest speeds, but I don't know about the industrial.
They were spotty in the industrial area, is what was going on.
But also there are some places in the industrial area that have had high speed dug into their own business at their own cost. So which, like, are you talking this industrial area behind
Yeah, over by,
Living Branches Church?
yes, in that
Okay,
area,
okay.
correct.
So, sorry, your question was about Starlink then?
If it's, something that we can help businesses understand that there's options, not necessarily Shaw or TELUS, but maybe Starlink is an option that they can use to help their businesses get through this.
Okay, so I don't know how,
So, yeah, you want us to put a pamphlet together of available services in?
Just because it's becoming a question and a concern that we're not, it's not being provided in just little pockets in the industrial area. So maybe it's something we can go to those businesses and say, here's options for you.
but I think, would that not be the businesses? Like, because there is Starlink, that's a known fact.
It's a new one, yeah.
Yeah. Councilor Fraser?
The only thing I think with, as a municipality recommending Starlink is it's in beta right now. So even, it's not fully up and running. There's limited numbers in different areas. They're only taking so many. And there's still the upfront equipment costs. So I'll, in a regular conversation, say, have you tried Starlink? Absolutely. But I would be hesitant as a official organization to recommend something that's in beta at the moment, just because not everybody can get it. If everybody decided they wanted it, there's just not enough accounts right now because it's just in the rollout phase.
Well, your worship, I guess, as administration, where we get hesitant is promoting one company over
Yes.
the other. So I'd rather see the businesses do that research.
Because are some of those other private companies available in town? Like the ones that are out, like
CCI.
Yeah.
I'm sure they would be.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And Airwaves, I would think they probably would be.
They're just expensive.
Okay.
I don't think that as a municipality we can
promote one over the other.
I'm not-
Or pretend
not
that we
saying-
know what everything is out there, so I would just, my suggestion to businesses would be, you'd have to research the providers, I don't know what else.
And I would go for the pamphlet as well, because if you forget one on the pamphlet,
Yeah, then really,
Yeah.
then you're really gonna hear it.
Yes. Are we good?
think-
That-
yeah, I
They're
think-
good, okay. Anybody else have any admin inquiries? Does anybody have any notices of motion?
I apparently do. From the beginning. And just coming from watching the Clearwater County Council's meeting today, and their discussion of having recycling services in town, would it make sense to send a letter inviting them to participate in the Eco Center and potentially outlining what we think that could look like? I don't know how to phrase that, or,
I think that's a great idea.
okay, thank you.
We could send them a letter inviting them to participate. And I just don't know how we've come up with a cost. How could we word that in there?
Okay, so your worship, just for procedural aspect.
Yes.
So a notice of motion is a notice that you're going to bring this forward at the next council meeting.
Okay.
Right,
Okay.
so it's not the ifs and
Don't
ands. and
discuss it
hows.
right now.
Or council can amend the agenda to add it right now and pass a resolution.
So do I ask, is that what I do, is I ask council to amend the agenda?
Can we
Put
just,
forward a motion to amend the agenda by adding your topic
8.4.
or can we just,
under 12. Then council has to approve that motion and then you can do your motion.
Jeez, politics is hard. Okay, well, and then I would like to make a motion to amend the agenda because I just think it's timely. So amend the agenda to accept my notice of motion to
To
discuss
add
today.
add Eco Center
Invitation.
invitation.
Okay.
under 12.1?
Yeah, we do under 12.
Yeah.
Okay, so is everybody in favor then of amending that agenda? All in favor? Okay,
It's more difficult than it already is. Okay.
okay.
So now we're allowed to talk about it.
Councilor Phillips?
I think that's a great idea. We have the service, it's here. It's obvious that, you know, their residents are looking for it and looking for it in town, so why not make the offer? Like, at least have the
The
conversation.
Publicly, yeah,
Publicly,
for sure.
Yes.
Councilor Fraser?
Well, I think it's timely. They are looking for a solution. We have a solution. We should at least extend the invitation again to say, we may have a solution to your problem that would work for both of us. So I agree.
Other comments?
Just us left.
Now what do I have to do?
Put forward a motion?
All right, then I'm making a motion then that we extend an invitation to Clearwater County to participate in our Eco Center. And is that enough, or do I have to? Yeah, that's good, okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Dean.
Could we get engraved invitations?
Is everybody clear on that motion?
I don't even know if I am anymore.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay. Does anybody have any other notices of motion?
No.
Like easier ones than that? Jeez.
Okay, so seeing that we have concluded everything on the agenda, and then some, I will adjourn the meeting at 7:53. We do not have anything for closed sessions.
What?
What?